My story of how I found myself on the brink of survival. Everything turned upside down one ordinary fall day. I remember that moment down to the smallest detail. The morning began as usual. The alarm clock rang at 7 o'clock sharp, and I stretched and opened my eyes as usual. It was raining outside the window, and the city streets looked gray and dull. But it didn't bother me. I loved such days, because they gave a special warmth to the comfort of home. After breakfast, I went to work. It was chilly outside, and the wind was throwing raindrops in my face. I came to the bus stop, where, as usual, people were crowded together. Some were reading the newspaper, some were listening to music on their headphones, and some were just staring into the void, absorbed in their own thoughts. I pulled out my phone, too, and checked my email. Nothing important, a couple of work emails and spam. When I got to the office, my colleagues were already discussing the latest news. I worked at a small advertising agency, and our team was friendly and close-knit. That day we had to present a new advertising campaign concept to a client, so everyone was a bit tense. The work went on as usual: discussions, revisions, presentations. By lunchtime, I felt a little sick, like a cold. I decided that it was just fatigue after yesterday. I continued to work, trying not to pay attention to how I felt. But gradually the symptoms became more and more severe: headache, body aches, coughing. By the end of the working day, I felt quite bad. When I returned home in the evening, I felt even worse. The cough got worse, my head was splitting, and my temperature rose to 38 degrees. My wife offered to call a doctor, but I refused, thinking that tomorrow everything would pass. The night passed restlessly: fever, chills, constant awakenings. In the morning I got out of bed with the feeling that I was seriously ill. The next day I went to the doctor. He examined me, listened to my complaints, and prescribed a standard set of tests. He also prescribed cold medication, hoping that it would help with the symptoms. But there was no improvement. Moreover, after a week my condition worsened so much that I had to go to the doctor again. This time he looked carefully at the results of the tests and referred me for a more serious examination. The test showed that I had a rare type of leukemia. When the doctor told me the diagnosis, I felt the world around me suddenly stop. Everything that had happened before seemed so insignificant and distant. The fear and anxiety I had felt before instantly faded in the face of this new threat. In an instant, I was cut off from the reality I was accustomed to. The world literally crumbled beneath my feet. I couldn't believe it was possible. I was only 35 years old, and instead of planning for the future, I was now thinking about how much time I had left. I sat in the doctor's office, listening to his words, but they seemed to pass me by. My head was empty, my thoughts scattered in different directions, not allowing me to focus on anything in particular. The doctor kept talking, explaining the possible treatment options, but his voice seemed muffled, distant. It was as if he was somewhere far away, behind a glass wall that separated us from each other. When I left the office, I stood in the street, not knowing where to go next. All the people around me seemed alien, their lives going on, while mine had stopped. The noise of the city, which had always been the background of my daily life, suddenly became loud and intrusive. I felt alone among the crowd, lost in this vast world. At home, my wife met me with a question in her gaze. She knew that something serious had happened, but she didn't dare to ask directly. I sat down across from her and began to tell her, trying to keep myself in control. The words came out slowly, with difficulty, but she listened silently, not interrupting. When I finished, we both sat in silence, thinking about what we had heard. Her eyes filled with tears, but she tried to hold back for my sake. We had a long discussion about what to do next. My wife insisted on going to specialists immediately, looking for the best clinics and doctors. I, on the contrary, wanted to wait a little longer, to reflect on what had happened. We argued, but eventually came to a compromise. I promised to start treatment immediately after additional consultations. The next days were hectic: meetings with oncologists, consultations with hematology specialists, gathering information about possible treatment methods. Each new visit brought new details, new hopes and fears. Doctors talked about chemotherapy, bone marrow transplantation, various experimental techniques. It seemed that every step forward was accompanied by new difficulties and unknowns. My wife supported me, telling me that I was very important and necessary for her. We both tried to remain optimistic, but fear and anxiety still gnawed at us from the inside. The first weeks were particularly difficult: chemotherapy, nausea, hair loss. I spent long months in the hospital, where I saw people who were lying next to me in the surgical ward disappear literally before my eyes. It was completely unexpected for me. I could not understand how a person with whom we talked yesterday, had lunch together, suddenly could take and leave. These events made me think about the fragility of human life, about how quickly everything can change. Every morning started the same way. Nurses came to check our condition, doctors made rounds, and patients tried to hold on as best they could. But sometimes it happened that one of the rooms was empty. Someone had left us, leaving only memories and unanswered questions. At such moments, I caught myself thinking that life is something ephemeral, unpredictable. And although the doctors did their best to help everyone, fate sometimes had a different plan. One morning I woke up with a strange feeling of emptiness. The room was quiet, too quiet. The bulk of the neighbor with whom we had shared stories of our lives the day before was empty. His bed was neatly made and his things put away. The nurse told me that he had passed away during the night. That moment was etched into my memory forever. I realized that none of us are immune to such changes. Each day the hospital walls grew narrower and narrower, and I began to notice many of the patients slowly turning into shadows of themselves. Their faces grew pale, their voices weakened, and their hope melted away. But there were those who fought to the last, who believed in the best and did not give up. These people inspired the others, gave them strength to continue on their way. Sometimes, when it became especially hard, I remembered those who were no longer with me. Their stories, their smiles, their jokes, it all stayed with me. They became a part of my path, a reminder that you should appreciate every moment, every opportunity to be near your loved ones. The hospital became a school of life for me. Every day was a challenge, and every once in a while I just wanted to give up. Sometimes it seemed to me that time dragged on endlessly, and sometimes it flew by. Every day was filled with pain, fatigue, and fear. But gradually I began to realize that just waiting for recovery was not enough. I had to fight, not only physically, but mentally as well. Over time, I began to adapt. Human nature is amazing. We are capable of experiencing many things and getting used to almost everything. Some people break under the weight of such trials, but I had the strength to keep fighting. The support of my loved ones played a huge role. My wife was with me every day, helping me to cope with the physical and moral load. She supported me in the most difficult moments, when it seemed that there was no point in continuing. Her presence gave me confidence that everything was not in vain, that there was a bright path ahead. We spent hours together, talking about the future, making plans that helped distract me from my gloomy thoughts. These conversations filled me with hope and faith that one day everything would end well. In addition, I began to find comfort in small things. For example, reading books distracted me from the pain and allowed me to immerse myself in another world. Music also played an important role. Some tunes soothed my soul, others energized me. I learned to switch between different activities so that I didn't dwell on my problems. Gradually, I began to notice changes in myself. Despite my physical limitations, my spirit was getting stronger. I began to better understand what it means to live in the moment, to appreciate simple joys and not to waste energy on unnecessary worries. Of course, the struggle was not easy, but it was through it that I was able to gain new strength and confidence. Every day became a step forward, albeit a small one. I learned to rejoice in any success, whether it was an improvement in my health or just a good mood. This inner work helped me to overcome many obstacles and get closer to recovery. But it wasn't all change. After the initial shock and panic receded, I began to feel a keen desire to help people. For some reason, I really wanted to help people who were sick. It was as if I began to feel a sense of guilt. I thought that if I helped everyone now, maybe God would save me. But soon I realized that the real change had to happen inside me. I started meditating. Yes, it was strange and unfamiliar at first, but over time I found that meditation helped me calm down and focus on the present moment. Instead of thinking about the past or the future, I taught myself to live in the here and now. Then I tried yoga. The slow exercises helped me regain control of a body that felt foreign and weak. Gradually, I began to feel more confident, even though the physical activity remained minimal. Yoga also helped me learn to listen to my body and understand its signals. My morning practices became something of a ritual. First, I would sit in a comfortable position, close my eyes, and focus on my breathing. Deep inhalations and exhalations allowed me to clear my mind of unnecessary thoughts, creating space for inner peace. I then moved on to simple asanas that strengthened muscles and improved flexibility. Each movement was performed consciously, with full attention to what was happening in the body. Over time, these practices began to bear fruit. I noticed that I began to react less to stressful situations, and I was able to tolerate pain and fatigue more easily. I also started sleeping better, which was also a major accomplishment. I read and studied the stories of people who healed from the disease. I was interested in various methods, fasting and cleansing of the body. As for specific methods, there is no something that fits everyone. But it's not just about the body. If a person wants to get well, he should reconsider his life. Another important step was working with a psychologist. We talked about my fears, anxieties, and hopes. The psychologist helped me to see the situation from a different angle, to find meaning in what was happening, and to accept the inevitable. I realized that not only physical health is important, but also emotional well-being. Gradually, I began to change my attitude towards the disease. Instead of fear and despair, I found strength and determination. I stopped seeing illness as an enemy and began to see it as a challenge to overcome. This change in thinking gave me new strength and energy. Working with a psychologist helped me to understand my emotions and feelings more deeply. I learned that negative thoughts can aggravate health conditions, so I need to learn to control them. We discussed the importance of having a positive attitude and faith in healing. Gradually, I began to notice that my inner state was becoming more stable, and this had a positive effect on my physical well-being. I also began practicing relaxation and visualization techniques. By visualizing my body fighting the disease, I felt that I was putting all my will and energy into the healing process. My life began to change. I began to socialize more with friends and family, sharing my thoughts and feelings. They supported me. Their love and care became a source of inspiration for me. I realized how important relationships with people are and how they can be supportive in the most difficult moments. After a few months of treatment, the first signs of improvement appeared. The doctors noticed positive dynamics and hope began to return. Remission did not come immediately, but every day I felt better and better. It was a long way, full of difficulties and doubts, but I passed it. Now I can talk about it calmly, without trembling. Having gone through such an experience, I realized how important the support of others is. Close people, friends, specialists, they all played an important role in my struggle. The disease taught me to appreciate life, to enjoy every moment and not to waste time on unnecessary things. I live my life differently now. I am no longer chasing success and material wealth, but the quality of life is more important to me. I try to help other people in similar situations, share my experience and support. The disease has been a lesson to me. It showed me that life is a gift that should be appreciated and cherished. You never know what turn lies ahead, so it is important to live here and now, enjoying every moment.